Hey, thanks for tuning in. In this lesson, I'll be painting this bushman riding on a Bilby, and it's done with Mont watercolour. Before we get into it though, if you would like to see more art lessons, log on to our webpage at www.montmarte.net because there's lots more there. We have links to our Facebook, Instagram and our art club, The Creative Connection, on the page also. So let's get into it. The first thing we need to do is to transfer the image onto the watercolour paper. This image can be found in the PDF from the above link or at our website. Shade the back side with a 2B pencil, tape it onto a sheet of watercolour paper and gently retrace the line work with a 2H pencil. This is printed out to A3 sizing. Once all the information is retraced, redefine the line work with the 2B pencil. The paper I am using is an A3 Mont 300 GSM watercolour pad. Now we can add some paint. This is the 24-piece watercolour paint set. The first thing I'm going to do is to lay a subtle background in. I won't go into the colour recipes on the video because they are all in that downloadable PDF. Start by pre-wetting the area with water and then you can lay in the colour. You can see that this is a pretty effective way to suggest fur. For the eyes, I lay in an umber and then lay a thin layer of black over it. This gives it real depth. For the white areas on the belly, I lay in a very light mix of ultramarine in dashes. Whilst I have this tone, I lay it into the shadow areas, as shadows always show as cool tones. I thought it might be a nice idea to paint a tartan blanket under the rider. First, you have to neatly draw in the pattern and then lay in the appropriate colours. You have to concentrate because there is no margin for error. Of course, you could paint it any colour you like. Anyway, there is a template to follow in that PDF if you would like to give it a try. face, I lay in the shadows first with a tone mixed with yellow ochre, crimson and ultramarine. Keep in mind the light source which is emitting from the right. Dry the grey with a hairdryer and add in a touch more crimson and relay in the shadow areas. This will cover more area. Once this tone is in, dry it again and create another mix from burnt sienna, yellow ochre and crimson, and lay this in over the entire area. Lay it in slightly darker where the shadows fall. This is a fairly simple way to paint a skin tone, and as the head is less than an inch in area, the simplified steps are okay, I think. Obviously, painting skin tones in watercolour can be very involved, and everybody has their own recipe and steps. I lay some cerulean into the eyes, smooth it in, and then lay in some umber into his moustache and eyebrows. I've also added some umber into his hair. The arms can essentially be handled the same way. I already have the colours mixed and start with the grey shadows. Again, take the light source into account when you do lay in this initial shadows. Another thing to bear in mind is when you lay colours over dry colours, you can't work it too much, or the underlying colour will dirty the top colour. I created yellow-green from yellow ochre, cadmium yellow and ultramarine and lay it over the swag. I darken this tone with a little more ultramarine and lay it into the shadow areas. I then add a touch more crimson and lay in my darkest values to define all the folds. I then create a mix of Payne's Grey, ultramarine with a touch of yellow ochre and lay this over the billy and darken the appropriate areas to suggest a cylindrical quality. See you next time.